Let's figure out on which program I edited this creative portrait to make my eyes look like that. Look on screen and you will see the objectives for today. We're going to 1, start getting creative. Let's do this. Number 2, we are going to find out which program did I use. I got many questions asking this when I published this photo as a thumbnail of what is Lightroom. And if you want to see that video, I'm linking it in right there. And how is this only 2 steps? Remember that you can download this same photo of me. Below in the description is the link and it is taken in RAW. I am Giselle Behrens for Photo TV NYC, live for you on helping you make amazing photos. So if you are ready to up your game, let's do this. First of all, I want to show you guys how I took this photo. So this is me in my workspace. You can see my little background behind and my camera. I use a Sony 7R III. I'll link it in below in the description as well, because I wanted to have a very crisp photo of my eyes. And this is the original photo. So if you did download it, you have it on your Lightroom ready to go so we can edit it. Now do remember that this is a RAW format photo. If you're not sure what the difference is between editing a RAW photo and a JPEG, this is the link to the video to RAW versus JPEG, so you guys can take a look at that and come back to this video, because it's so important to have flexibility when we do edit in Lightroom. So the first thing is that I took this photo with the vision of exactly what this photo was going to look like for my thumbnail. And of course, I wanted my face to look triangular, and naturally my face is very round. So I actually used Lightroom. That's the answer. I used Lightroom, believe it or not. A lot of people don't believe me, so this is exactly why I'm doing this tutorial, so you guys can follow along with me. So how did we do this in 2 steps? Well, the first step is that we're going to go to our Develop module in Lightroom, and we're going to go to Basic. So in Basic, we're going to want to adjust our exposure because it is pretty dark and we're looking for a dramatic look. So right now, I want to make sure that my skin tones are looking good. So I'm augmenting my exposure over here to the right, and I'm going to leave it at around 1.45, okay? Now, this ensures that my skin tones are looking okay, and even though I'm not happy how my background also brightened up. But don't worry, we will take care of that. Following the exposure, we're going to add some contrast, and just a little to make our darks blacker. But we really do want to make our shadows dark, because as you saw in my final image, the only thing that you can see is a triangular faced shape. So I'm going to go to my shadows and I'm going to make these dramatically darker and just continue making them darker until around -45. This is going to give us the working space over here and over here to transition the brighter areas that I have in my background to black. Now we're done with our basic. And believe it or not, those were the only tools that we used on Basic. And now I'm going to go to HSL and I'm just going to augment my luminance on red. And that's a little trick that you can do for portraits. You can augment the luminance either red and or orange. And that's going to just help you give you a little bit more of glow on your face. So I'm going to add just around 36. Also, if you have any imperfections, like any red spots or anything like that on your portrait, this is going to help it become the same tone, even out the skin tones. So that's a really good tip for portraiture. So now we're going to close, and that's it for our step number 1 on general adjustments, believe it or not. Now we're going to go to our selective tools, and we're going to start with spot removal. So I did eat some pizza. Yes, I ate Domino's pizza the day before. So when I woke up, I was a little bit puffy, which is totally fine. So for this photo, because we are looking for a drastic and dramatic effect, we are going to just correct that puffiness just a little bit. Your hotkey is going to be Q, and you're going to want a large size for this. You can press your right bracket on your desktop, and here I am showing you the hotkey. Larger is the right bracket and left bracket is smaller. So when you have a nice and big brush, you're going to want to feather it. I have it at 75, and I'm just going to paint here this slight. It's ever so slight. It might have been a little bit too big. So Lightroom automatically selects an area. I'm just going to drag this area to the bottom part. Now that looks a little weird because I do want to look like an alien, but not so much. So I'm going to diminish my opacity of this spot removing tool to around 45. That gives it a little natural feel. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing on my right side. So I'm just going to ever so slightly adjust it over here, and my settings are already done with the opacity, so I can just really leave it as this, like this. I want to make sure that I don't get too much of my nose. I think I used the brush that was too big, but it's fine. Let's take a look. I'm gonna hide it just to see, and I think that it looks pretty good. Now we're going to go back and we're going to eliminate these earrings that I have on because I don't want to call attention to my spectator's eye anywhere else except my main focal point, which are my eyes. So if I leave these earrings over here, they're so bright that my eyes are going to get confused and they're going to want to go to the earrings. So I want to make sure that I help my spectator, and I'm going to help my spectator look directly at my focal point without getting confused. So I'm going to go here, and I did a spot correcting tool. Now I'm going to go to clone over here on the right because I want to make sure that it's a hard and 100% opaque spot removal because I don't even want a hint of the earring. And my feather can go a little bit lower as well. So that's for that one. Now let's do the same thing on my right side. Again, my settings are already set to clone and 100%. So I just want to move it a little bit. You can play around with the feathering just to make sure that it doesn't look too obvious. We want it to look as if it was always without earrings. So I'm just going to move this over here just a little bit. And I selected a nice dark area for Lightroom to replace my earring area with. So over here, I'm going to select a little bit darker area. You can play around and see what works best. And I think that around there is okay. Now for my next selective adjustment, we're going to press M. And in M, it's going to take us to our linear masks. So with M, we're going to start removing this bright background and making this spot removal a little bit more seamless by adding black. And we're going to add black with our exposure slider. So our exposure, we want to make sure that it's nice and deep. So I'm just leaving it at -2.7, but we can edit that and just make it even darker. And I like to do several of these linear masks just so they look natural and they don't look that they were actually there on purpose. We wanted to make look this photo as if it was completely naturally taken like that. So I want to make sure that my ears are just barely visible. So right there, I'm just adding a mask over a mask, and I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side. If you want to add a mask and you can't because the lines are in the middle of the image, you can press your H hotkey, and H hotkey is going to leave your masks as active, but they're going to hide it. So I'm just going to go ahead and press H because it's a little bit easier for me to work without the distraction of the lines, and then I can press H again and see where my mask fell. Now that we have our background black, I still want to remove part of my neck over here and make my face more triangular to give it that alien-like look, because I am going to have my Lightroom logo cover my nose and mouth for my thumbnail. And again, take a look at that video if you haven't, just to see the best digital workflows for Lightroom and what is Lightroom for beginners. So with this mask, I'm just enhancing the shape of my face to look a little bit more triangular. Around there is fine. And I can add one last mask right here on the top, just to give it that dramatic look and feel that we are going for. Right there. Okay, that's great for our masks, our linear masks. Now we're going to press K. Right there on the screen, I'm showing you the K. Now K is going to be our hotkey to go to our paintbrush, because now we're going to get creative and we're going to start fixing our eye area. And this, remember, that is our focal point. So the first thing I want to do, because it is my focal point, I want to add sharpness over here on my lashes. And yes, they are real if you're wondering. Thank you. I'm going to link in below the description of the product of my secret weapon, 2 big eyelashes. They're right here. I'm showing you on the screen. Just in case if you guys were wondering. And I'm also going to darken up my eyebrows. So this is going to create some contrast in between my eyelashes, this area of my eye, my eyebrows, and then the color that we're going to add to the iris. Okay, so my first one is going to be new. I'm going to double click on the word effect, and we're going to add clarity. So clarity is going to help me with the sharpness of my eyelashes. I'm going to zoom in, and you can always zoom in with your hotkey Z. And I am 1:1 right now, so I want to have a brush that is big enough to cover the eyelashes. So I'm going to start painting in, and clarity, as I mentioned, is going to help you sharpen the area that you're painting, because it's going to give you some contrast in between the midtones. So that's going to give us a punch on the midtones, which translates as contrast. And I'm going to do the same thing for my eyelashes on this area. If you want to go crazy, you can even spot remove this tiny piece of mascara that went on my eyelid. I didn't go too crazy because it was going to be a thumbnail and it's barely visible. So now that we did the clarity, we're going to start painting in our eyebrows. So I'm going to go ahead and go to new, reset my effect button by double clicking it, and we're going to go to a darker exposure. So again, I want to have a brush that is the size of my eyebrow, and I'm just slightly going to paint on it, just ever so slightly. And this is going to create a more dramatic effect because we're going to have a darker eyebrow in contrast with the brighter eyelid and the eyelashes. So that's going to give you that wow effect that we're looking for. So now that this part is ready, I'm going to just slightly illuminate the bottom part of my eyes So all of my attention will be then on my iris, which we're going to color in. So I'm going to hit new. And yes, you can have hundreds of paintbrush selective areas on your photo. So you can, I mean, it's really just about getting creative and deciding how the photo you want is going to look. So I did new, and now I'm going to go to exposure, and with a big paintbrush the size of the bottom part of my eye, I'm going to start painting in light, over here. I want it to be nice and fluffy, so I'm just gonna undo this. There was a small one that went before, and now I'm just going to paint in over here, and I'm gonna do the same thing for my other side. And again, this adjustment is just going to help the attention of our viewer to go to our iris. Now that we're done with that, wait, this one became a little bit too bright, so I'm gonna lower my exposure to around 0.58. Now we're gonna hit new, and in effect, we're gonna zero it down, and we're gonna go to saturation, because we're gonna start painting in the eyes, and in the eye area, we want to desaturate completely any color that is in this area, because afterwards we want to add blue. So we're going to go to saturation and slide this tool all the way to our left, and it's going to be -100 saturation. And you're going to see that it's going to take a few steps. It's going to take like 2 or 3 brushes at 100% to really desaturate this. I'm going to go down, make sure that I'm on a nice flow. So I'm in flow 90 and feather 78. Now I'm going to just go to my other eye and do the same thing. I just want like this center area of my eyes, the ones that is closer to my nose, to be desaturated and painted blue, because that's where the glow of the Lightroom logo of the thumbnail of the video is going to be. So now I'm going to press new. I'm going to leave my saturation in -100, and I'm just going to start painting again until I see that this area is 100% desaturated. That's going to give us a nice blank canvas so we can start adding in some color. So this is my second one. I'm going to press new a third time and continue with my desaturation. Here we go. Now on this third one, because it's already 100% desaturated, I'm going to add exposure, because here we're going to start painting, and after I add exposure, I added 1.16. I'm going to go down to my little box and select my blue color. So you can really select any blue color that you want. And we're just going to make sure that we're painting in it, and we can start seeing a blue hue start to pop up. So I'm going to go to my left eye and do exactly the same thing. And this blue color is going to pop up because now there's no color contamination on the bottom. It's just this blue color. Now I'm going to go ahead and click new again. So this is our fourth paintbrush. I don't have to desaturate anymore because it's already 100% desaturated. So I'm going to select now a blue color that it's a little bit brighter. And I'm just going to start painting in with this blue color over here. And I'm going to go to my other eye and paint the same blue color over here. And we can do this process as many times as needed to start bringing out the color over here in Lightroom. So it usually takes like 2 to 3 steps for each. I'm going to do one additional blue color just to give it that wow effect over here. So it's a really dramatic change between that, I guess, that brownish greenish eye color to this really deep blue color over here, or bright or saturated. Let's zoom out with our Z and see how it's starting to look. And there you can start seeing how this effect is really looking. If we want it to be brighter, we can augment our exposure on the same active mask, and I augmented it to 1. And now we're done with our color, so I'm going to hit New, augment my exposure, and I'm just going to paint in all of my eye some light. And I want to make sure that there's no blue selected. So I'm going to reset that to 0. I'm going to augment my exposure and I'm going to augment my saturation just to make that change really, really drastic between the existing color and the blue that we're adding. So there we go. And lastly, the last brush that I am going to paint is just to darken the outer side of the iris. So then that's going to create a more dramatic effect of the colors that are in the eye. So I'm going to hit New, reset down by double clicking the word effect, and my exposure I'm slightly going to make it darker to -118. Now this brush we want it to be the size of the thickness of the darkness of the outside of the iris. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Make sure to follow with me. So it's the size of the darker area of the outside of the iris. So this is going to define and create some contrast between the iris and the white area of my eye. There we go. So I'm going to zoom out. And here's my very drastic looking portrait. I'm going to augment that exposure and it's in -0.66. So I'm going to press my K again and see the before and the after by toggling the backslash button, and you will be taking a look at this drastic change in the photo by these 2 steps of general adjustments and using the masks in Lightroom. So on screen, here's the before and the after. We learned that yes, go Lightroom. You can definitely get creative with Lightroom. You can use it to make creative things. You don't have to leave Lightroom and go to Photoshop or any other program. Lightroom is so powerful that it gives us tools to really start getting creative. Number 2, we adjusted some general adjustments to get these edits, as well as we used some masks. So you really have full control over your image here in Lightroom. And number 3, remember to step out of your comfort zone. This is definitely going to be helping you to create some amazing and incredible photos that are different from everybody else's. So I invite you to go ahead, step out of that comfort zone, and continue watching these Lightroom tutorials, because you and I are going to be doing some amazing photos together, different to anything that you've ever seen before. I am Giselle Behrens for Photo TV NYC. Hit that subscribe button because we are here for you with all of your questions. You can comment below on the description, and we'll see you guys on our next video. Bye guys, thanks for joining.